30 years ago, when I was a baby speechwriter, I decided I needed to learn more about presidential speech writing. Now, I wasn't writing for a president or even a presidential contender. Back then, I wrote for the CEO of a Wall Street firm. And since we're talking the late 80s, early 90s, it's probably redundant to say he was a man. That's still redundant. But I wanted to learn more about presidential speech writing because I felt it represented the pinnacle of the craft, and I wanted to be as good as I could be. So I went looking for a book, and I found one called Presidents Creating the Presidency, Deeds Done in Words, by two women in academia, Carlin Kors Campbell and Kathleen Hall Jamieson. And apparently I chose, well, the University of Chicago website says that experts considered this the definitive guide to presidential rhetoric for at least a decade after its publication in 1990. Now, I have to tell you, that book astonished me. Not just because of its analysis of presidential communications, but also because of one little word that the co-authors dropped into the text. At first it seemed incongruous, like rhinestones on a business suit. But the more I read it, the more natural it seemed, even inevitable. The rhinestones of that word sparkled so hard, they made me reconsider everything I thought I knew about the world up till that point. Do you want to know what the word was? Sic. The Latin word meaning thus, S-I-C. Academics stick it in square brackets to indicate errors in the material that they're quoting. As in, when a president speaks, he, sic. There are no errors in that. None but the assumption that because presidents had always been male in the past, they would always be male in the future. Campbell and Jamieson refused to make that assumption. And so they got me to reconsider all of the assumptions that I had made as a woman and as a writer. They got me to look again at how the world sees me and how I see the world. When a president speaks, he erases me and everybody who looks like me. Add the sic, and you acknowledge that it's possible for women to do great things. That's a whole lot of change for one three-letter word. Now the question is, how can we scale that change? How can we take it from one person to a million, a billion, a trillion, women and men, people of all genders all over the world? Before I answer that question, I want to offer a disclaimer. You have probably heard the saying that when all you have is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. I am a writer, so of course I believe that words can change the world. But it's not just words. We have to back them up with action. Seems really complicated, but I boiled it down to 4 steps. Step 1, adapt your language to fit what you believe to be true. Step 2, be confident in the rightness of your position. Step 3, have the courage to stop playing the existing game. And step 4, live and work right now in the world you want to create. So, step 1, adapt your language to what you know to be true. Did anyone notice that I mentioned gender inclusivity a minute ago? I talked about men and women, and I did that because I wanted to stress that it's not just women's job to fix this mess. We need allies to wake up to the world that they have created, the world that they have enabled, and help us create a better one. So that's the gender binary, women and men. And then I said people of all genders. And I didn't make a big deal out of it until now. I said those words as if they're words I say every day, because they are. And I didn't get defensive about it. This is my truth. These are the facts as I know them. They might not be your facts yet, but I'm willing to believe that the more you hear the phrase people of all genders, the more you will understand that this is the way the world is. And if you're reading a book that says men and women, you might insert your own mental sic. Or if you're talking to someone, you might say, you know, I prefer to say people of all genders because really not everybody fits into the binary. You're not making the person you're talking to wrong. You're just stating your truth. Let a little fresh air into their minds, and maybe you can get them to begin the process of changing the way they see the world. Step 2, be confident in the rightness of your position. A couple of years ago, I met Beth Andres Beck, who is an activist working to make the technology industry more welcoming of people of all genders. Actually, anybody who's not a straight, white, cisgender male. They don't seem to have trouble getting tech jobs. But Andres Beck has more confidence than any 12 people I have ever met. She says, when she goes to a speech or a discussion, instead of walking in assuming I'm going to be attacked, I go in assuming that I'm right, which is at least as true. And when people hear my confidence, when they hear how sure I am that these ideas will help solve the problem we're dealing with, they become more open to reframing, get a little fresh air in there. Now, out there in Silicon Valley, Andres Beck is really clear that her work is not about women in tech. She says it's about the behavior of men in tech. And I think that's where we might have gone wrong in the last 30 or 40 years. Your businesses and academic researchers have been studying women. They've been measuring us and counting us. And we've made some progress, but there's a stopping place where nothing fundamental changes. And I have to wonder, if maybe that's because women are not the problem. Businesses and business coaches tell women all the time, don't wait for somebody to give you permission to speak. And that is excellent advice, but I don't think it goes far enough. I would say don't wait for someone to give you permission to feel the way you feel or think the way you think. Your feelings are valid. Your analysis is correct. They built this system for men, for straight, white, cisgender men. Women, people of color, genderqueer people, people from non-Western cultures will never fit smoothly into it, not without losing some essential part of ourselves. So, step 3, find the courage to stop playing the existing game. 30 years ago, when Campbell and Jamison wrote their book, they lived in a world even more androcentric, even more male-dominated than ours. Back then, if you didn't play the game, your voice might never be heard. Your article wouldn't be read, your book wouldn't be published, your job might be imperiled. But they wrote their book anyway, full of those 6, because they wanted to tell us their truth. They wanted us to see how they see the world. They wanted to create that change. What would happen if more of us did the same thing? Step 4, the most important step. Step 4, live and work right now in the world you want to create. You know, all of us deserve to do the jobs, the work we want to do, that we're qualified to do, without having to twist ourselves to fit somebody else's mold or some outmoded idea of how the world ought to work. The good news is we don't have to anymore. Women are creating our own economy, and when we do that, we set the rules, we choose the leaders, and when we do that, no one can stand in our way. American Express put out a report called The State of Women-Owned Businesses, and they found that in 2018, women started an average of 1,821 new businesses every day. That's double the rate of the previous 5 years. Women of color New businesses up 150% in the last dozen years. And we're not just talking about small businesses either. The number of women-owned businesses that generate revenues over $1 million increased by 46% versus just 12% for the market as a whole. Women you have heard of and those you may never hear of are building their own businesses in the financial services industry, in venture capital. There are so many women-owned law firms that they have their own trade associations. Women are creating nonprofits to bring up the women leaders of tomorrow. Vanity Fair published a photograph of 26 women of color who are founding or leading companies in Silicon Valley. And Whitney Wolfe Herd, the CEO of Bumble, she said she wants to create a female internet where women have the power. Who wants to be on that internet? You know, we have a choice now. We can choose to keep reading the mainstream media and inserting our own mental sticks when we see problematic language. We can continue working for traditional companies with their traditional ways of doing things, but you do well to lower your voice so Chad and Bob can hear that you're a leader. Or speak up. Speak up for your values. Work together to create a world in which people of all genders can succeed because of our empathy and humanity, not in spite of them. When you adapt your language to fit your truth, when you live that truth confidently, when you model what else is possible, people will come along with us, and that's how change gets established and spreads. You know, while we're changing the world, let's reclaim that sick. Let's translate it into English so everybody knows what we're talking about. Thus, let's break it out of the square brackets because we are not correcting errors. We are pointing out the immense capabilities of women. Women can be leaders. Thus, women can be creators. Thus, women can be any damn thing we want to be. Thus, 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 thus. You know, when women have not just a room of our own, but businesses of our own, publishing platforms of our own, stages and screens where we can tell our stories in our way, when people see what the world can be when women have equal access to it, the old paradigm will crumble under the weight of its built-in inconsistencies. Words can change the world because people use words in speeches that reach millions and in intimate conversations with just one or two other people. And all of us have conversations. So all of us can create that change. Thus,